Hi, I'm Jennifer Grimson, and you're listening to The Passive Investor Show.
The views and opinions provided on this show are for informational purposes only and should not be misinterpreted as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make or consider any investment or course of action. For more information, please go to passiveinvestorshow.com. Hey PI listeners, this is John Fortes. I'm making it a point to speak to as many investors as possible. My goal is to position myself to be a blessing to my network through conversation. How could one be a blessing through conversation? The easy answer is by listening. A simple conversation can open many opportunities and doors. I always ask myself this: what do I have to lose by having one more conversation? Going back to high school, I've connected friends and family in my network to one another, even if it didn't benefit me. And I continue those same principles and practices. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. If I can't help you, I probably know someone or something that can probably solve your problem. I'd love for you to become a part of that network. Go to www.johnfortes.com, create your investor profile, and schedule a call. How can I best serve you through conversation? In the words of Clarence the Angel from It's a Wonderful Life, no man is a failure who has friends.
And now, the Passive Investor Show. Here's your host, John Fortes.
Welcome, PI listeners, to the Passive Investor Show. I'm the Passive Investor Consultant, John Fortes, your host of the only ranked podcast for passive investors in multifamily syndications and real estate funds. Our goal and purpose of this show is to be a resource to investors and help them master their passive investments by beating inflation 1% at a time. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are focused on growth, development, and also, I never go down this hole, but I got a great, unique guest that really qualifies for what we're going to experience today. Today I have Jennifer Grimson. Jennifer was a single mother who lost everything twice. The second time, she rebuilt by creating small empires for financial independence. She created over 1.4 million in income, producing investments with nothing more than a W-2 and grit. In 2019, Jennifer created the Micro Empires podcast to share her story and to pull back the curtain on the path to financial independence. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm excited to be here.
Always a blessing to see you since we first met. We met a couple weeks ago through Julie Holly. I tell you, man, it's been awesome. It's been great conversations. It's been, great networking as well.
Mm-hmm.
So let's tell the audience a little bit about your background, your journey, and how you got to where you are today.
I encapsulate it in my little tagline there, but yes, a single mother, and I lost everything twice. That means I was with no job, no car, no place to live, no money, 2 kids to support on my own. And I did that twice. And the second time is when I realized I can never let this happen again. Now, all this time I was a corporate employee. Or the majority of the time I was a corporate employee. So it's not as if I didn't work. I did work. I just made poor financial choices. And my choices were relational, meaning I turned my financial well-being over to another human being, which we should never do. And women tend to do that probably more than men do. So the second time, I knew that I was going to get a corporate job in sales and that I would do okay with that. But I knew that I could not achieve or build real wealth, or rather security, if I didn't have other things to fall back on. Because if I got let go or laid off or whatever, that's it. So that's where I started. That's where the concept came in my mind that I'd always had 3 streams of income. That's sort of a rule that I've had, but that they needed to, for me, it's an empire, whatever it is. So if I have, $5,000 in a bank account, it's my money and therefore it's my empire. So I just called it these little micro empires. And I managed, once I got back on my feet and rebuilt my credit, it was within 4 years through real estate, really, I was able to create $1.4 million in income producing investments. I did that through short-term rental, or Airbnb, I should say. And that kind of led to me discovering through investments groups and networking and all the things that you and I have talked about before over a period of time, realizing that there were all of these tools that I had never heard of: cost segregation, bonus depreciation, 1031 exchanges, all of these things that I had never heard of before that I could use. And I thought, I'm a pretty smart person. Why don't I know about these things? So the impetus for the podcast really was I wanted to tell my story, but my story is just one in a million. I wanted to kind of pull back the curtain of what I had learned. And I knew that that would mean I'd have to share everything very honestly. And I had kept it all a secret, which is very common. I had kept all of my financial woes a secret, except for very, very close family and friends, because I had so much shame around it. So I see that a lot with what I'll call, I don't know, maybe financial gurus, the Dave Ramseys of the world, the Susie Ormans of the world. And they've helped a lot of people, but there's a lot of like shaming on people about how you spend your money and what you do, and et cetera, et cetera. So that was part of it. And what's happened through the journey of the podcast is really learning. The more you learn, the more you learn. There seems to never be, especially in real estate, there's never an end to the ways that you can make money in real estate. And many of those ways to make money do not involve you personally having to own a piece of property. I call it micro empires because I want to encourage people who feel like they don't have enough and aren't ready to begin to go ahead and begin with whatever they have at that moment.
That's pretty awesome. I love the name. I love how you came up with it. So when you first started
Thanks.
on your, let's scale back a little bit. There's a couple of things that I want to kind of pinpoint, right? So when you started your micro empire, what did that first micro empire? You mentioned the 3 different streams of income. Can you just talk about a little bit of those?
Yeah. So I've always had 3 streams of income. When I separated from my first husband when my children were 1 and 3, and moved into an apartment. So at that point, I had like a day job. I worked at night as a recruiter on the phone. This is back in the days of dial-up. So this was a long time ago. And then I did like little jobs on the side. And again, none of those things, none of them were really big money earners, but they were sacred to me because they're what I created. Once I was living in California, once I moved back to the East Coast, where I'm from, near you, I again landed a large job, but I kept, one of the things I've always done is I consult with people on their LinkedIn profiles, teach them how to how to network without being smarmy on LinkedIn. Our friend Yona Weiss is the ninja networking dude. And I work with executives on their CVs. So very high level, high net individuals who never have to really write a CV or work very hard, but at some point in their life, they probably should, especially if they're going to start a business. So I've always kept that as a part of income. I started painting a few years ago, so I have art also. But the second time I lost everything, I had my job. I had still doing the side consulting, and I started painting. And my rule, and you and I have talked about this, like how you prefer to, if you're going to buy something, buy the best. Don't waste your money on the cheap stuff. My rule is everything that I buy has to have more than one job. So if I buy a chair, I prefer that the chair can convert to a bed or be used at the dining room table or whatever. I've just kind of gotten that habit. So I just think it's a good idea, no matter how small the amount, so that you never feel completely trapped in one thing if it were to go away.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So when you started experiencing these little pitfalls, or let's just call them falls or stumbles, or whatever you were going through at that time, which one hit you the hardest?
I would call it a complete fall flat on my face. Which one hit me the hardest? You mean like losing a job, or what do you mean?
Well, which one affected your living situation the most? I guess that would be the best way to put it.
So my relationships. So in both cases, the first time I was getting a divorce from someone, and I was in a very, very unhealthy relationship. And the best and safest way for me to get on with my life was to walk away from everything. Not that there was much of anything. I also married I talk a lot about money culture on my show. I married somebody who had a totally different money culture than what I grew up with. And that is a serious problem in a marriage. In fact, I lived in what I call financial chaos. So by agreeing to basically not fight over anything material, my children and I were free to move back home to New England so I could get started again. And I moved in with my mom and my two children and 3 suitcases at 29 years old. And that's all I had. And we lived with her for 2 years, 9 months, 8 days, and 49 minutes. But who's counting? You move back in with your mom when you're 30 and every day you're like, have you eaten? You come from a big family, so you can understand what that's like. But, if it weren't for her, I had no place to go. So I'm very, very fortunate. But that was one part of the lesson. Then I rebuilt. And I rebuilt with a fever. I landed a 6-figure job. I purchased a piece of land. I designed and built my own home. Then I got another opportunity here in Nashville, Tennessee. I came down here and I met somebody and was still working up the corporate ladder. And ultimately, I was with this person for 7 years. We lived together for 4 years. And my job was very, very stressful. I was a sales director at a software company. And he really had the means for me to not work. And he really wanted me to not work. I also, part of the financial struggle, my ex-husband sued me 25 times in 10 years. And that's possible. And that was all based in California. So for 10 years, my entire income basically was going to attorneys. I spent over $500,000 in attorneys, which is why I had to file bankruptcy more than once. So when I had the opportunity to leave my corporate job and stay, just be at home for a while, I took the opportunity and I did it. But what I had done was I had gone from the frying pan to the fire, because now I was with somebody who, when the relationship ultimately did not work out, my name wasn't on the house. My name wasn't on the car. I didn't have a penny to my name. In fact, the only thing I had was an old 401k, which I didn't know how I could use at the time. But my former partner had asked me to roll it over into his business, and he never rolled it over. So the only money I had in the world, he had taken from me. So I started over again. That time was really just a kick in the gut, because I'm like, I can't believe I've done this again. And not just to me, but to my kids as well. So that was when I knew. So we moved in with my sister and her family for 4 months. For them, 4 months, 8 days, 5 hours and 39 seconds, I'm sure. While I found a job. I would never have found a job had I not kept up my network, because the way I found a job was I just called people I knew and knew me and my reputation for sales. And I was able to land a job right away. That never would have happened if I didn't have that network. And then I began the process of rebuilding my credit and ultimately buying a house, which was my first step. And I knew that when I bought that house, that it had to be more than just shelter. It had to work. And in 2014, I discovered Airbnb, and that just my whole life blew up at that point, because that was such an amazing opportunity for me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I really am sorry about everything you've gone through. It's just sincere from the bottom of my heart. It means it's crazy what you've experienced and gone through, but seeing you today, knowing you, you are a strong person.
Yeah.
Sucks that you had to go through it, but
yeah.
You are so strong from our conversations. It's just, I can feel it too. The energy is there.
Yeah.
Man, it's a lot to dissect from that, but I'm just going to keep going. Now, you mentioned Airbnb, and that's, we focus on real estate. Primarily, we focus on apartments on this. What is your investment what are the investments that you focus on today? Is it still Airbnb?
No, I actually got out of that business. You're not going to believe it. I got into that business in 2014 here in Nashville before anybody really knew what it was. My investor friends were like, what do you mean people are sleeping on your couch? Like, no one could understand it. I ended up using the tools like a 401k and buying 3 properties, bankrolled like crazy, but it's a lot of work. It's a high touch, high overhead business. It's a lot of money, but it's also a lot of furniture and silverware and soap and where's my blow dryer and all kinds of stuff that I don't want to deal with. But what happened for me was it was out once the word got around, not that I spread it around or anything, but investors got wind of the type of town that Nashville was and the huge tourist industry that we have. the competition was unbelievable because I had 3 adorable houses and these investors were building high rises with rooftop decks and, jacuzzi tubs. And I couldn't compete with that. So I watched the cash flow decrease through 2019. And so did many of the other sort of OG Airbnb people here in town who had single family homes, which have a high carrying cost. And I just thought, I kept watching it go down and I just thought, and the city got more and more strict. And I don't, like an entrepreneur, I don't like to be told what to do. You probably have that in common with a lot of people. And so I just decided to liquidate, which was really hard because it's actually a very emotional business, I think, especially when you start the way that I did. And I liquidated out of those properties 30 days before COVID hit. And I couldn't believe it. Now, I had already started, my husband, who we're newlyweds, we've only been married a couple of years. When we met, he had some real estate investments, but we started talking about investments together. And he had done a 1031 into an apartment complex in Manchester, Tennessee, which is about an hour from here. And it's nothing sexy. It's a C property and it kills it. And even through COVID, we've had really no vacancy to speak of because folks in C properties can't afford that. And folks who can't are moving down from these really expensive places. But yeah, I was really fortunate. I got out of those investments. And so at this moment, I'm cash heavy. And part of what I wanted to do, especially when COVID hit, was I was like, I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to sit on this. And part of what I tell in my podcast is I'm not a huge risk taker. And people often think that investors, entrepreneurs, and maybe they mostly are huge risk takers. I'm not. I could never be. I had to keep the money coming in, keep insurance for my kids, all that stuff. So while I am an active investor and I am investing, I don't put everything into one thing. I try to diversify across the board. I do more than just real estate. And I try to look at things that serve more than one purpose, which is why I was excited to learn about the fund of funds, which you do. So that's how I got into multifamily. Now we've done a joint venture as well with 67 doors in Knoxville, Tennessee. That's been a great experience. And I'm also have just begun partnering to do capital raise with, what's the word I'm looking for? Operators who I trust. And I don't know how other people do it. I just know with my life experience and things that have happened to me, my reputation is more important than anything. So I think people come to my show and it's now has the traction that I had hoped that it would have because they feel the sincerity in who I am. And, I just want to lead them to opportunities that can make them money, that can make their money make money. And many of those people, most people, don't have $100,000 available for investment. They need to start a little smaller. So I'm interested in helping them and helping other folks who are ready to go bigger.
Absolutely. I love your why. I love how you're getting there. One of the things I'm just like you. I like singles and doubles. Triples and home runs will come if you perform well, but I'm just focused on singles and doubles. And it sounds like you're the same. You're pretty conservative, not high risk, just trying to beat inflation 1% at a time. That's what we focus on here. So thank you for sharing that. That's something that is really near and dear to my heart because, the risk factor, especially as we get older, do we need to take that risk?
Right.
When we're younger, we could, but right now,
right. It depends on what hangs in the balance, right? So when I had my kids fairly young and my daughter had children even younger. So you never know what's coming around the board. So I became a grandmother in my 40s, which is of course fantastic. But at the time I was like, I can't believe, this is happening. I can't believe after what you watched your mother do that you're doing it as well. But I mean, I think it depends on where you are. If you've got kids at a young age, hopefully if you're a responsible parent, you're not really taking giant risks. And I think it's also part of why in my show, I ultimately started talking about money culture and have really followed that down a path because for me to understand ultimately, which I don't think I really understood till I was in my 40s, what drove everything, I had to go back to the beginning. How was I raised? What was my relationship with money? My relationship with risk and everything else. And it's important, not especially, but one of the things I talk about, it is February. So it is Valentine's Day this month. relationships and money. So as I'm dating in my middle age and I meet my husband, and it's a second marriage for both of us, we both have assets. We're both investors. We both have to come to the table. If you can't talk about money, that's going to make it really hard. I think it's different when you're both 22 and you have nothing, but he knows about me that like my need for security is more important than my need for identity. So I don't need a Range Rover and a really expensive purse or any of those things. But I need to know that I can pay the bills or that I can have my car towed if it breaks down in a pouring rain on the freeway, story that you told me. Oof. Yeah.
Don't mention it.
Yep. Mention it. I know. And my daughter who lives in Idaho called me just a couple of weeks ago and she needed 4 new tires and she didn't have that money. Most Americans don't have $400. How great is it that I'm like, okay, boop, Venmo, there you go. That's not going to keep me up at night. We're not worrying about the necessities, but it's really sad. I think in our culture, meaning our national culture, that we don't educate enough on that, not only wealth building, but really what it means to you, because that's really what drives how you get there.
I love that you're at a place where you can really give to your children and even give back to other people in a generous manner too. One thing that you mentioned on your, earlier in the show, you said you were starting to reach out to other sponsors that you have relationships with and, build your capital raising platform, which you are essentially building your real estate firm. And that's a perfect touch to how you're starting from the beginning, because that's what we focus on this show. So it sounds like you're starting to get it off the ground and you're starting to make those connections, which you have to have first, because you have to have the deal flow first. And then, you have access to the capital and you're going to raise it second. So I love that you're doing that. Friend of the show always. I love it. One piece of advice for the PI listeners.
For how they should get started, you mean?
Whatever you want to give, whatever you feel worthy for the PI listeners.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Let them have it.
Let it rip.
Okay. Well, I think it's interesting because, I said that one of the streams of income I will always keep till the day I die is something I'm really good at, but I don't really enjoy doing. And that's the LinkedIn thing and helping people with CVs and helping them understand what their true gifts are. And so when I meet with people, and I'm talking about very high earners, I try to focus on, they want to start something new, whether that's a new business or a new company or whatever. And oftentimes it's like, I want to go to juggling school and, but I've been a scientist my whole life. Well, that's great. Okay. That's good. But if you want to survive, why don't we focus on your strengths for right now? So it's interesting because I know your show focuses a lot on like, what are the tools that someone can use to build an infrastructure? Well, you're an IT guy. That makes sense that you would go there. My strength is sales and networking. It took me a long time to kind of embrace it was definitely the best occupation for me to have because it had the most money and the most freedom. So I tend to, and when you talk about, building my firm and stuff like that, I get a little queasy because I think, well, what I've got is some really great connections and people and things. So I'm a doer. So, and then the infrastructure comes later. And I think if I can do and create income, I can hire people to do these other things that I'm not the best at. So that's where I'm at right now. I have structure around my podcast. I have structure around my personal investments, but as it's rolling out to literally the beginning steps of raising capital, it's everything from just reaching out to all the people that I've ever known, putting it on the show, having an intake form, getting that in a CRM, translating that to a newsletter to get the opportunities out to people. And, being a salesperson in a technology company, I always had somebody who would create that. So we always had some really smart IT guy who I'd say, oh, it's like bringing all your receipts to your tax guy. And they just go, oh, okay, we'll get a system for you. And you just have to learn how to use it. That's the thing about being an entrepreneur. You never know what tool you're going to need. Here's something that I've just started using today that I never thought I would say this: TikTok. Because in 1 minute, you can give advice. And it's not my natural. That's not where I want to go. That's not where I'm comfortable. But whatever gets the message out is the message that I want to get out. So that would be my advice. Go where your strengths are.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So one thing you hit on that you said, it makes you feel queasy, but it's pretty natural for who you are because it's a relationship business. So as you started your CV business,
I really, well, resumes, CVs.
CVs,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
Curriculum vitae.
resumes,
Yeah.
resumes. As you started a resume business, you need to know people because you're selling a skill
Mm-hmm.
to them as a service. And basically, real estate operations is a service and a skill that operators have. It's just building those relationships. So if you're the middle person and involved in between the capital and the operators, it's a good place to be. And you need to have those relationships started. So you already have that because
Right.
you've done it in other businesses and other jobs. So you shouldn't be too worried or feel too queasy about that.
Right.
Jennifer, how can we stay in touch with you?
Oh, well, the easiest way, everything's on my website, which is micro-empires.com. I give away a free book on there. And if folks want to fill out the form online and share with me what they're going through, I will respond to every single person. And I'm humbled by how transparent folks have been. And then they can book a call with me if they want. Also, all the socials, either Micro Empire or me, my name, Jennifer Grimson. I don't really separate the two very much. Um, it's kind of hard and kind of silly. Like the older you get, I'm like, whatever, it's going to be what it's going to be. But what you just said, I think is really important because that's very true. My strength, and when I worked for other companies, I was always hired to start a new division. So I knew I could get in there and generate it and build the trust and build credibility. The infrastructure of how it all got supported is something that I'm learning that's new. But, fortunately, if I'm good at the first part, I can pay for the second part.
I love it. Now we get into my favorite question of the night, of the evening, of the day, of the show, however you want to phrase it. What is the meaning behind your company name?
Oh, Micro Empires. So I appreciate that you gave me a compliment on that earlier, because when I was picking the name, and this is always true, it's like picking a baby's name. Don't ever tell people what you're going to name your baby, because you're always going to have somebody who says, I knew a Stephanie and I hated her when in high school. So early on, it was hard. I couldn't really come up with anything else. And I'm like, I felt I could see other people like me downplaying what they were doing. They're like, well, I work here, but I have a little side business. It's a car wash. Oh, and I own a duplex, and so I'm running, those are empires, and you shouldn't feel like they're not valid. And for example, when I started just even my art business, I just started selling, one painting at a time. I never really replicated it or anything else, but that's a stream of income for me. Therefore, it's an empire. If it's mine, it's an empire. And I thought it was an easier way, because empire is such a big word, like we're building an empire. But micro empires was something that I thought, and it could be anything, right? You could be a stay-at-home mom and want to make that your empire, your family, your micro empire. You can, and I did for a long time. My 9-to-5 job was my micro empire, was one of them, because I wanted to be the best, because I knew I could make the most money. And so I became very, very focused on that. So that was the name. I went around and around, but once people started to talk about it and really put it together, I just interviewed someone the other day who's, he's a police officer, he's former military, he's a real estate investor, he's a restaurateur. And he just realized that these are all empires that he's been building for years, little micro empire. They're all empires now because he's been working on it for so long. But that's where the meaning came. And I hope it's intriguing enough for people to check it out.
I love it. I love it. It passes the approval.
Okay, thanks. That's all that matters.
I appreciate you. Not that I'm gonna say so or end all. But Jen, thank you for stopping by the show. We really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Don't forget to download your free copy of the investment tracker. It allows you to track up to 5 investments, compare sponsors, markets, and most importantly, projected versus actual returns. To get your copy, go to www.projectedreturns.com. PI listeners, thank you for listening. As always, we hope this was the best resource for your investment strategy, but also the best use of your time. Remember, if this episode helps you, you can help us by leaving a review on iTunes. I hope you feel compelled enough to share it with someone you think this would resonate with as well. As much as it pains us to leave you, but you know what time it is. Time to go put this into practice. Till the next time we meet, happy investing. PI listeners, I'm grateful for your time and I appreciate you for listening. It would mean the world to me if you went to iTunes and left a rating and written review. Let me know how you feel about the show. It really makes a big difference with getting the podcast out there. Don't forget about our Facebook group, where all of our guests are members of. I'll be there to answer any of your questions, or even questions you might have for future guests. Subscribe so you can get the latest episodes and our fan favorite quick hitters. Finally, I want to keep you updated, so head over to johnfortes.com and sign up for the newsletter. If you're interested in partnering with me, sign up on the contact page so you can talk to me directly. I look forward to connecting with you. Happy investing.